I knew something was wrong the moment my boat touched the dock, because 10 cabins stood on my island, and none of them were mine. The wind felt different that morning. Heavy, suspicious, like the shoreline itself was holding its breath as I stepped off the boat and stared at the wooden structures scattered across my land. Fresh lumber, bright paint, smoking chimneys, people walking around like tourists who owned the place. My island, my inheritance. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It was as if the world had tilted under my feet, and I was the only one who noticed. A woman in a bright red HOA vest strutted toward me, clipboard clutched like a weapon, sunglasses too big for her face, smile as fake as the welcome to our community banner hanging behind her. She didn't even ask who I was. Karen, sir, this area is restricted. HOA development site. You need to leave. I felt my heartbeat thud in my ears. Restricted? Development site? Leave my own island? I took a slow breath, trying to make sense of the scene. Cabins I never approved. Workers drilling into soil I grew up running across. A sign claiming this place now belonged to the Silver Shoals Homeowners Association, an HOA that didn't exist 2 months ago. Me. This is private property. She snorted, like I just told a joke she'd heard before. Karen, not anymore. The island was sold to us for community expansion. We have the deed. My stomach dropped, cold and hollow. Sold?
Impossible.
I had the deed in my safe. My grandfather's signature stamped across it, the only thing he left me after he passed. But before I could say anything, she raised her voice loud enough for her workers to hear, like she wanted witnesses. Karen, if you don't remove yourself immediately, the HOA will file a trespassing report. And trust me, you don't want that. I stood there, unable to move, unable to speak. The sound of drills and hammers echoed behind her, each strike digging deeper into my nerves. A gull screeched overhead, wings cutting through the gray morning sky like a warning I'd failed to see coming. Felt like a dream. No, a nightmare. And I was wide awake. Every memory I had of this island flashed through my mind. My grandfather teaching me to fish off this very dock. His laugh carried by the wind. The nights we spent under the open sky, talking about how one day this land would be my sanctuary. Now strangers were drilling into it, walking over it, claiming it. Karen stepped closer, lowering her voice, tilting her head in that condescending way people do when they think they've already won. Karen, you're lucky we're even allowing boating access. Most people don't get special treatment. I felt something inside me shift. Slow, burning, dangerous. Me, I'm not going anywhere. Her smile twitched, the first crack in her armor. And in that single moment, I realized something. Whatever was happening here wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. Someone wanted me gone. Someone wanted my island. And Karen was just the beginning. The storm hadn't started yet, but I could feel it building inside me. And when it broke, I knew everything was going to change. Before everything collapsed into chaos, my life was simple, quiet, predictable, and exactly the way I liked it. My name is Daniel Holt. I work as a marine surveyor, spending most of my days on the water inspecting boats, coastlines, or remote properties people rarely visit. I've always preferred silence over crowds, tide over traffic, and wind over noise. Maybe it's because I grew up on the water, or maybe because the only real home I ever had was the island my grandfather left me. Holt Island. 5 acres of untouched land, wrapped in pine trees and jagged rock, with a single stretch of sand on the northern shore that glowed gold at sunrise. I'd spent every childhood summer here, barefoot, sunburnt, happy. My grandfather used to say the island had a heartbeat, and if you listened closely enough, you could hear it in the way the waves met the shore. It's yours one day, he'd tell me, sitting on the old wooden dock with a fishing pole in his hand. This land stays in our family. Nobody touches it but us. When he passed, the island became more than property. It became my refuge. I built a small cabin near the tree line. Nothing fancy, just wooden walls, a metal roof, and a porch that faced the water. I didn't live there full time, but I visited every weekend to breathe, reset, and feel connected to something that still made sense. In the mornings, the fog would roll in low, weaving through the pines like a living thing. The air always tasted like salt and damp earth. Sunlight scattered across the water like shards of broken glass. And at night, the island went so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat echoing in your chest. I never imagined anything could disturb that peace. Not in a place this isolated. Not in a place that legally belonged only to me. But trouble has a way of finding you, even when you think you've hidden far enough away. Started small. A letter taped to my mailbox on the mainland dock. Silver Shoals Community, Notice of Integration. Community? What community? I lived alone. The island was mine. No neighbors. No developments. No hoa. I crumpled the paper and tossed it aside, assuming it was junk mail or some generic scam targeting shoreline properties. But then a second letter came. Then a third. Each one more aggressive than the last. Failure to comply will result in fines. Unauthorized structures must be removed. You are required to attend the upcoming HOA orientation. I thought it was a mistake. Maybe they'd confused my address with someone else's. So I ignored the letters and kept living my life. Until the day I met her. Karen. I didn't know her name back then. All I knew was the voice. Shrill. Sharp. Like she'd swallowed a whistle and never recovered. I was tightening the mooring lines on my boat when she marched down the dock like she owned the entire coastline. Karen. Are you the owner of that island out there? Her tone wasn't curious, it was accusing. Me, yeah. Why? She scanned me from head to toe, like my existence offended her. Karen. You'll need to attend the Silver Shoals HOA briefing this weekend. We're restructuring the district. I remember laughing. Actually laughing. Me. There is no HOA for my island. She smiled. Not a warm smile. One of those thin, tight ones that tell you the conversation is about to get worse. Karen. There is now. Her footsteps clacked away on the wooden planks, leaving an echo that somehow felt like a warning. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was the beginning of the storm. The first real sign that things were spiraling came a week after Karen's little dockside performance. I had just returned from a week-long offshore inspection job. Exhausted, sunburnt, smelling like diesel and seaweed. All I wanted was one quiet evening on my island. Just me, the trees, and the slow rhythm of the tide. But the moment I stepped onto the mainland dock, I saw it. A thick yellow envelope slapped onto my boat like a warning tag on condemned property. I peeled it off and opened it right there. Notice of violation, Silver Shoals HOA. Fines due. $4,200. Reason. Unauthorized cabin construction. I stared at the paper, reading the line again and again. Unauthorized cabin construction? I hadn't built anything new in years. Me. What the hell? The absurdity of it made my chest tighten. My cabin had been on the island before I was even born. And suddenly it was unauthorized? I turned the page. Secondary violation. Failure to attend mandatory HOA orientation. Fine. $500. My jaw clenched. Mandatory? I wasn't part of any HOA. I never signed anything. No one asked me a damn thing. A shadow fell across the deck. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Karen. Karen? Oh, good, you found the notices. We were worried you were ignoring us. Me. I am ignoring you. Because this, I held up the paper, isn't real. She tilted her head, sunglasses reflecting the water, lips stretching into a syrupy smile. Karen? It's very real. The Silver Shoals district expanded this season. Congratulations. Your island is now part of a managed community. Me. Managed by who? Karen tapped her clipboard. Karen? Us. Something prickled under my skin. Anger mixed with disbelief. Me. You don't have the right to fine me, or claim authority over my property. Karen. Actually, we do. And if you keep resisting, the fines will double. I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. Me. This is ridiculous. You know that, right? She leaned in closer, her voice lowering to a cold whisper. Karen, ridiculous or not, it's happening. And if you want to avoid serious consequences, you'll cooperate. That word, consequences, hung in the air like a storm cloud. But it didn't end there. The next day, I found a group of surveyors on my shoreline, measuring tape, stakes, mapping equipment. Me, hey, what do you think you're doing? Surveyor, HOA sent us. They're dividing the lots for future development. My heart nearly stopped. Lots? Development? Me, this island isn't for sale. Surveyor, we were told it was. I felt heat rush up my neck. Rage, panic, confusion, all at once. Me, told by who? Before he could answer, a familiar voice cut through the wind. Karen, by the rightful owners of this district. She stepped out from behind a pine tree like she'd been waiting for her cue. Karen, you've already been warned. Stop interfering with official work crews. Me, this is my land. She waved a paper in the air. Karen, not according to our deed. A cold spike of dread punched through my chest. Me, what deed? Karen, the deed filed last month. Last month? No, that wasn't possible. My grandfather's deed was decades old. Ironclad, untouched. I took a step toward her. Me, show me. But she pulled the paper back and smiled like a cat guarding a mouse hole. Karen, you'll see it soon enough. And when you do, you'll understand this isn't a fight you can win. Her workers kept hammering stakes into my soil. Karen turned her back and walked away. And I stood there, hands shaking, heart racing, watching strangers carve lines into land that had always been mine. As she disappeared into the trees, I heard her say one last thing to her assistants. Karen, finish up quickly. We break ground tomorrow. Break ground. Tomorrow. The real nightmare hadn't even started yet. I thought the surveyors were the worst of it. I thought the fines, the fake notices, the petty threats would eventually stop if I pushed back hard enough. But Karen wasn't done. Not even close. The next 48 hours became a blur of disbelief and rage. It started with noise. Chainsaws, engines, metal hitting rock. When I returned to the island the next morning, the peaceful silence I cherished was gone, replaced by the roaring sound of construction equipment grinding into the land like it was theirs to destroy. I sprinted up the path toward the clearing, every step hammering my chest. And then I saw it. Trees, my pines, my grandfather's pines, were falling, one after another, crashing to the ground like bodies in a battlefield. I froze, just stood there, staring, as if my brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. Me, HEY. Stop. A bulldozer backed up, its beeping echoing through the clearing like a taunt. Workers turned. Some hesitated. Others kept going. I pushed through the crowd, adrenaline drowning out fear. Me, who gave you permission to cut down my trees? Foreman, HOA order. Everything here is marked for development. Cabins, boardwalks, community center. Me, are you insane? This is private property. He shrugged, pointing to a stack of documents. Foreman, not according to the deed we were shown. That word again. Date. The deed I hadn't seen. The deed they refused to show me. I felt something inside me crack. Me, where's Karen? I didn't have to wait long. She stepped out from behind the half-fallen pines, wearing that same arrogant smile. Clipboard still glued to her side like it was part of her. Karen, you're interfering with authorized work crews again. That's another violation. Me, you're cutting down protected trees. Karen, correction, our trees. I clenched my fists. My pulse hammered in my ears. I couldn't believe what she did next. She lifted a can of bright orange spray paint and walked toward my cabin, the one my grandfather built with his own hands. Karen, this structure needs to be removed. It's not up to code. Before I could stop her, she dragged a giant fluorescent X across the wooden siding. The spray hissed like a snake, leaving a scar across the home I grew up in. My voice cracked. Me, don't touch that. Karen stepped back, satisfied. Karen, if you don't remove it by the end of the week, the HOA will handle demolition. My stomach twisted. My lungs ached. I felt like the ground itself was tilting. You can't do that. Karen, watch me. For the first time, the workers paused, not because they cared, but because even they seemed surprised by her boldness. But she wasn't done. That afternoon, I returned to the mainland to file a police report. The officer behind the counter looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Officer, an HOA can't seize your private island. Exactly. So stop them. Officer, we can't intervene without proof of wrongdoing. They're cutting down protected trees. Officer, got any photos? Video? Permits you can show? I swallowed hard. All I had were my words. Meanwhile, Karen had documents, fake or not, that everyone else believed were real. Helplessness washed over me, thick and suffocating. When I returned to the dock that evening, someone had vandalized my boat. Paint across the hull. A note taped to the wheel. Stop resisting. You're outnumbered. My hands shook as I crumpled it. I couldn't believe what she did next. The following morning, 10 prefab cabins stood on my shoreline. Freshly installed overnight, lined in a perfect row like soldiers claiming territory. 10 structures I never approved. 10 intrusions onto the land that was supposed to be safe. People were already moving into them, dragging luggage, laughing, taking photos like it was a vacation resort. Karen walked among them proudly, greeting them as if she were the queen of the island. Karen, welcome to Silver Shoals Island Village. Island Village. My island. Her village. I felt sick. She spotted me across the clearing and raised her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Karen, oh look, our previous owner. Here to cause trouble again. Previous owner. The word hit harder than any punch. My throat tightened. My vision blurred around the edges. Something told me the worst was still coming. I could feel it in her smile. Cold. Sharp. Certain. A storm wasn't coming anymore. It was already here. That night, the island didn't feel like mine anymore. The air was colder. The waves hit the shore harder. Even the pine trees, what was left of them, seemed to stand like silent witnesses to my failure. I sat on the steps of my small cabin, staring at the neon X Karen had spray-painted across the wood. Rain had started to fall, soft at first, then heavier, until the droplets drummed against the metal roof like distant gunfire. I felt hollow, like something inside me had caved in. Everything my grandfather built, everything he trusted me with, was slipping through my fingers. I buried my face in my hands, feeling the sting in my eyes I hadn't let out in years. I'm losing it. I'm actually losing my home. Thunder rolled across the sky, low and tired, like the island itself was grieving with me. For the first time, I wondered if Karen was right. Maybe this was a fight I couldn't win. Maybe the HOA had already bought whatever corrupt official they needed. Maybe the deed they waved around would hold up in court long enough to drain every dollar I had. A gust of wind rattled the porch. The cabins in the distance glowed with warm lights, silhouettes of families moving around inside, completely unaware they were trespassing on stolen land. I couldn't look at them without feeling sick. The rain washed over the spray-painted X, but the fluorescent stain didn't budge. It stayed, bright and ugly, like a scar on the cabin's skin, a reminder of my failure. I thought of my grandfather, his voice, his steady hands, the way he'd talked to the ocean like it was an old friend. He'd trusted me. He'd trusted me to protect this place. And now, a branch snapped behind me. I turned so fast I almost slipped off the stairs. It wasn't Karen. Wasn't a worker. It was Jonah, my closest friend. Practically my brother. He lived on the mainland and had been there with me through storms, funerals, and every stupid mistake I'd ever made. He stood under a dripping hood, flashlight in hand, rain running off him in streams. Jonah, you didn't answer your phone. Thought you were dead. I might as well be. He stepped closer, scanning the cabins, the cut trees, the torn earth. Jonah, Holy, Daniel, what did they do? I swallowed hard. Me, everything. He came up onto the porch and crouched next to the ugly orange X. Jonah, she really marked your cabin? Is she insane? Me, she's winning. The words tasted like defeat. Jonah looked at me for a long moment, long enough for the rain to soften between us. Jonah, you're not giving up. Me, what else is there to do? He straightened up. Jonah, you fight. You don't let some HOA queen steal what your grandfather built. Me, they have a deed, Jonah. Jonah. Then you find the truth behind it. You always do. I let out a shaky breath, feeling the tears I tried so hard to hold back burning at the edges. Me, I can't lose this place. Jonah sat beside me, elbows on his knees. Jonah, then don't. A long silence followed, filled only by the hush of rain, the distant echo of laughter from the cabins, and the soft groan of trees bending under the wind. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel completely alone. Still, fear coiled deep in my chest. What if I fought and still lost? What if Karen's deed really held weight? What if the island slipped away, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of my grandfather's legacy? Thunder cracked again, loud and violent. My thoughts spiraled, dark and heavy. But somewhere beneath the panic, beneath the anger, beneath the shame, there was a spark. Small, faint, but alive. Jonah nudged me with his shoulder. Jonah, you know your grandfather. He didn't raise you to run. I wiped a hand across my face, rain mixing with whatever emotion I wasn't brave enough to name. Me, then I need proof. Something real. Jonah, then let's find it. The storm outside raged on, wind screaming through the branches like a warning, or a push. And for the first time since Karen appeared in my life, I felt something other than fear. Determination. Sharp, quiet, growing. Somewhere out there, somewhere hidden, there had to be an answer, and I was going to find it. The storm didn't let up for hours. Thunder rolled over the island like giant waves crashing overhead, and every flash of lightning lit up the ruined clearing. The tree stumps, the muddy tire tracks, the cabins that didn't belong. I sat inside my grandfather's cabin with Jonah, the air thick with damp wood and rain-soaked clothes. We talked in broken sentences, half-formed thoughts, barely a plan. But one thing stayed sharp in my mind. If Karen had a deed, then someone somewhere created it or forged it. And if someone forged it, they left a trail. Jonah stood up, pacing across the creaky wooden floor. Jonah, there has to be paperwork. A transfer, a permit, something. Me. The original deed is still in my safe back on the mainland. It's untouched. Jonah. Then the HOA's version has to be fake. I nodded slowly, but doubt tugged at the back of my mind. If the police didn't believe me, who would? Still, something about this didn't add up. I grabbed my boots. Me. We're going to the mainland office. Now. Jonah didn't argue. The rain hammered us all the way across the short channel, the motor coughing against waves that felt heavier than they should have been. When we reached the dock, night had settled deep over the water. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across puddles. The Silver Shoals HOA office sat at the end of a narrow strip of rundown storefronts, an old fishing bait shop converted into an administration building. It was closed, of course. Dark windows. Locked door. Paper notices taped everywhere. But one window wasn't fully shut. A small gap at the bottom. Barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Jonah spotted it first. Jonah. Think you can squeeze in? Me. Watch me. The moment I pushed the window up, it gave way with a soft groan. Inside, the air smelled like old paint, moldy carpeting, and the faint scent of perfume. Karen's perfume. Something overly sweet and suffocating. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, landing on filing cabinets, metal shelves, and stacks of binders labeled with neat handwriting. HOA records, community planning, property development. But one binder stood out, a large black one, new, clean, sitting dead center on the desk like someone wanted it to be found. I approached slowly, pulse thudding in my throat. Jonah whispered, "Careful. She might have cameras." Me, "She's too arrogant for cameras." My fingers brushed the binder. Cold, smooth, unsettling. I opened it. Inside were copies of documents, faded, crooked, some marked with cheap stamps. But one page made my breath catch. A deed. My island's deed. But wrong. Wrong signatures. Wrong dates. Wrong seal. Jonah leaned in beside me, eyes widening. "Jonah, this is forged. Like, not even good forged." My fingers shook as I flipped through the pages. Every detail was off. Lines misaligned. Names misspelled. My grandfather's signature. A shaky attempt someone tried to copy. Then another page caught my eye. A receipt. Payment made to SSHOA filing specialist. Signed by Karen. Cold moved through me like ice in my veins. But there was more. Taped in the back pocket of the binder was a USB drive. Small. Dark red. Almost invisible. "Jonah, that looks important." I slid it into my pocket. And then footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Getting closer. Jonah's eyes shot toward the door. "Jonah, someone's here." We killed the flashlights instantly, dropping into the shadow behind the counter. The door rattled. A key scraped in the lock. My heart hammered in my ears so loudly I barely heard the door swing open. Karen's voice drifted in, cold, annoyed. "Karen, I know I left it somewhere." She moved around the office, heels tapping. Closer, closer. I held my breath so long my lungs burned. Her perfume hit the air again. Cloying, overwhelming. As she rifled through drawers. "Karen, it has to be here. I need it for the meeting tomorrow." Meeting? Tomorrow? Was she planning another step? More development? Another legal move? She paused. Her heels clicked near the desk. "Karen, why is this binder open?" Silence. A chilling silence. I felt Jonah tense beside me. Then Karen, "I must have left it like that." Her footsteps moved toward the door. The lock clicked again. Silence returned. I exhaled in a shaky rush, gripping the USB in my pocket like a lifeline. "Jonah, we need to see what's on that drive." We slipped out the window, disappearing into the darkness before she came back. Back at my mainland cabin. Lights off, doors locked. I plugged the USB into my laptop. The screen flickered, loading a folder labeled Project Island Acquisition. My stomach twisted. Inside were recordings, audio files, emails, transaction logs, maps, plans. One file was named simply Call with Grant. I clicked it. Karen's voice filled the room. "Karen, the owner has no idea. His deed is buried in his grandfather's old records. Ours will look more current. Once the cabins go up, no one can stop the annexation." A man's voice answered, deep and smug. "Grant. And if he resists? Karen. He won't have the resources to fight. We'll drown him in fines until he gives up or loses everything." My fists tightened. Then she said the words that ignited something fierce inside me. "Karen, by the time he figures it out, the island will be ours." My jaw clenched, my pulse steadied, and something inside me hardened into pure resolve. The fear, the helplessness, the shame, it all evaporated. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was fraud. Calculated, documented, recorded, and I had the evidence. I leaned back in my chair, rain tapping against the windows like a countdown. Jonah smirked. "Jonah, so what now?" I stood, slow, controlled, determined. "Me, now? We take everything from her." For the first time since this nightmare began, justice wasn't just possible. It was inevitable. I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. The recording I found kept replaying in my mind. Her voice, her lies, her plan to destroy everything my family built. By sunrise, something inside me had shifted. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. Only one thing remained. I'm ending this. I got up, showered, put on the cleanest shirt I owned, and walked out of that house with a calmness that didn't even feel like mine. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. And this time, I was the storm. The first place I went was the sheriff's office. Not to file a complaint, not to ask for help, but to expose everything. I walked straight to Deputy Harris, the only man in uniform I trusted. I placed my phone in his hand, hit play, and watched his eyebrows lift higher and higher as Karen's venom spilled out through the speakers. Once he's out, the house is ours. I'll make sure the board approves the foreclosure. He won't even see it coming. When the recording ended, Harris leaned back slowly. "Damn," he whispered. "She's been abusing her power for years. But this is criminal." Exactly the words I needed to hear. Within an hour, I had a full team backing me. County officers, a legal advisor, and a representative from the State Housing Authority. Each one of them listened to the evidence. Each one of them saw the pattern. Each one of them recognized what she had been doing to not just me, but several families on our street. And then came the moment I had been imagining since the day she first stepped onto my porch with that smug smile. We were going to face her. The convoy of cars rolled through the neighborhood like a silent army. Windows opened, curtains lifted, people stared. Word travels fast in a quiet suburb, faster than a wildfire. When we stopped in front of her house, I stepped out first. Her door opened before I even knocked. She stood there in her perfect little suit, hair sprayed so stiff it could survive an earthquake, eyes narrowed like she smelled trouble, and knew exactly who brought it. "Can I help you?" she asked, lips tight. I didn't say a word. I simply stepped aside as the officers walked forward. "Helen Parker," Harris said, voice firm. "We have evidence of HOA fraud, harassment, extortion, falsifying violations, and conspiracy to unlawfully seize private property." Her face drained of color. "That's ridiculous." "Save it," another officer interrupted. "We have recordings, documents, board member statements. It's over." For the first time since the day she moved in, she had no comeback, no smirk, no clipboard to hide behind. Just fear. Real, raw fear. And God, it felt justified. Neighbors began stepping outside. People she had bullied, fined, threatened, humiliated. One by one, they gathered on their lawns. It felt like the entire street was witnessing justice unfold in real time. As they cuffed her, she looked at me. Not with superiority, not with arrogance, but with disbelief. "You did this," she hissed. "No," I said quietly. "You did." She was escorted into the police car, the door slammed shut, and just like that, the monster who had stalked our neighborhood for months was gone. I didn't cheer. I didn't celebrate. But inside, I felt something loosen. Something that had been sitting heavy on my chest for far too long. I walked back home slowly, sunlight warming my shoulders, neighbors patting my back, whispering thank you. For the first time in a long time, the air felt clean. And as I stood on my porch, looking at the house that held every memory of my grandfather, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a victory. It was justice. The neighborhood felt different the next morning. Not louder, not busier, just lighter. For months, every step on the porch, every rustle outside the window, every unexpected knock had carried a layer of tension. Now, as I stood with a cup of warm tea in my hands, watching the sun roll gently across the quiet street, it felt like the first real morning in a long, long time. The birds sounded clearer. The breeze felt softer. Even the silence was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. I walked across the yard, the grass cool and damp beneath my feet. For the first time, I wasn't checking for violation notices taped to my door, or measuring the height of shrubs, or double-checking the mailbox for another fine. My hands weren't shaking. My mind wasn't racing. My heart wasn't bracing for impact. It was calm. And that calm felt like a luxury I had earned. Over the next few days, life slowly stitched itself back together. Neighbors smiled more. Kids played outside again without being scolded for noise disturbances. Elderly couples walked their dogs without fear of being reported. The entire street breathed a collective sigh of relief, as if we'd all been underwater and finally resurfaced. A few people came by to thank me. Some quietly, some with tears, some with relief so deep it looked like exhaustion. I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt human again. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, repairing an old wooden chair my grandpa had built, Mrs. Larson from across the street came over with a plate of cookies. She had lived here longer than anyone else and had faced her share of Karen's cruelty. "Feels like the neighborhood is ours again," she said softly, settling into the chair beside me. I nodded. "Yeah, it really does." She looked at me for a long moment before adding, "Your grandpa would be proud, you know? You didn't just fight for yourself. You fought for everyone." Her words hit deeper than I expected, because throughout everything, the fear, the frustration, the anger, I had kept thinking about him. The man who taught me patience, resilience, and the difference between right and wrong. The man who built this home with his own hands and believed that peace wasn't something you demanded. It was something you protected. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I closed my eyes and imagined him sitting beside me, rocking gently in that old chair, smiling with that quiet pride only he could wear. For the first time since he passed, the memory didn't ache. It warmed. The HOA board held an emergency meeting a week later. They dissolved the standing committee, issued apologies to the community, and appointed a temporary manager while the county supervised upcoming elections. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. A promise that the neighborhood would finally have a say in its own future. And as for the house, I fixed the fences, repainted the porch, and polished the old brass number plate my grandpa installed the day he moved in. Each repair felt like reclaiming another piece of him, another piece of myself. At night, I sat outside and watched the porch light glow against the darkness. No longer a symbol of fear or tension, but of safety, of home. Everything that happened, the chaos, the humiliation, the fight, left scars. But scars aren't signs of weakness. They're reminders that you survived something that tried to break you. And in surviving, you grew stronger. As I stood on the porch one last quiet evening, feeling the breeze carry the scent of freshly cut grass, I realized something. Peace isn't the absence of trouble. It's the strength you gain from facing it. And with that truth settled deep inside me, I finally exhaled, long, slow, and free. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more cinematic real-life stories. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.